So a friend of mine died a couple of weeks ago. He never got over COVID. And no, what I'm not talking about COVID itself. I don't know if he ever caught it or if he didn't. It was the lockdowns. And I'm going to kind of explain at length what happened with him. And I'm sure what's happened with a lot of other people and why that ties actually into independence. Everything kind of, all roads lead to independence, at least in my series. So for those who don't know, I used to own the local pub here in Prentice, Alberta, where I live. We ran it for 5 years, then sold it to another couple right when the pandemic was beginning. And for those who frequent pubs, who have worked in pubs, own pubs, or some are pub regulars, there's always, the regulars, the collection of barflies, the same faces you'll always see lining up in front. It's ironic, George Wendt just recently passed. He was the fellow who played Norm on Cheers. I mean, Cheers was modeled very much after what pubs are like. There's that regular crowd that come in daily after work. We had hours, probably a dozen people who usually I'd call them almost my afternoon shift. They usually weren't big tippers. They didn't buy big meals. They rarely stayed late. They're usually for a couple hours. But it was a high part of their day to get together and talk and solve the world's problems sitting at the front of the bar with each other. Like I said, every bar has them. And for a lot of them, people don't quite realize you go to the bar for supper, you leave, you see some of those regulars, you don't realize that is, for many of them, their only social outlet. That's their place. That's what they look forward to through the week. There's no sense judging. People do different things that they do for enjoying themselves. Some run radio-controlled cars, some are in sports. But there's a large group of people who see the local pub as their social outlet. And it's very important to them. It really is. And it shouldn't be dismissed, but it was. So when COVID came, when the lockdowns came, all of those people were displaced. When we talked about people who had trouble with the lockdowns and the restrictions when they were locked in their homes, you wanted social problems, issues, havoc. That was a lot of them. I mean, this was with all the people stuffed in their homes, but I'm speaking in particular with the pub. Now, it took, 2.5 years, really, before somebody was able to sit unrestricted at a bar like you used to be able to. So for that period, my friend, he'd retired early. He was still young. He'd retired quite young. He was relatively young to have passed away. He didn't take it well. That was his place. That was his outlet. So he introverted. I haven't actually seen much of him in years. As I said, I drove his wife to the airport recently. They had a long talk, his widow. And just to see how this last few years have been for him, and they've been bad. Once he'd lost that place to be and he was retired, he liked to drink, but he wasn't a heavy drinker. But once he'd gotten home with nothing else to do for years, the drinking expanded. He didn't go out. And then even once the pubs were open, he just didn't go out much anymore. Now, it was a cancer that killed him. That might have been coming regardless of COVID or him being locked in the house for years or things like that. I don't know. But the thing is, his last 5 years of his life were unpleasant for him. He missed out on seeing his grandchildren, seeing the neighbors, seeing his friends, or just enjoying himself because he didn't recover from the lockdown. He didn't have a social outlet anymore. He turned into a hermit within his home. So that was lost life. It really was those last 5 years. I mean, he still had time with his wife for those 5 years, and his daughters would visit and so on. And he did things, but not nearly as much as he used to. They didn't travel anymore. They used to travel. So what I'm getting at is where personal freedom is so important when people don't think about the little aspects. They don't think about what kind of, a lot of people thought of it, but we want to remind everybody of it. The damage when a government becomes too powerful, when a government will act without hesitation to infringe on personal freedoms, when a government thinks it knows best, because that was a big, huge issue with the COVID lockdowns, and not even just the economic damage caused by them, but the social damage. With the mob mentality of people following through with big government. And they so easily locked people in their homes, so easily shut down all of those social outlets. I'm just speaking of the bar one because it's the one I know of. How many people had similar incidents because they got shut away from the sports they used to participate in, or the clubs they used to attend, or whatever way they got out and socialized. And pubs were a real integral part. I mean, think about it. Since medieval days, they're one of the earliest businesses that have ever been around is pubs. It's our nature to get together. And now, 5 years later, we're still seeing a whiplash effect of the damage caused by the government when it thought it knew best. And we see now with hindsight that most of these restrictions were absolutely ridiculous. They did nothing to stop the spread. This thing had to run its course, and it did. But it caused a great deal of damage. So now getting back to the independence part. I mean, for my last video I talked about, we have to work towards something. We've also, we're not just working away from a bad system. We've got to be working into a better system. And that system has to be one where personal freedoms are paramount, where the individual freedoms are the default. And if in those extraordinary circumstances the government has to infringe on them, and I'm not a pure anarchist type. I do believe there's going to be emergencies and times when the government has to intervene, but that has to be an utter, absolutely last resort, and the government must be forced to make a strong case for that. I mean, the truckers' convoy is another example, right? I mean, that protest, it was overstayed its welcome. I know some viewers will get upset with me saying that. I think it was time that they were to be encouraged to move out of Ottawa. They'd made their point. They'd made an incredible point, but you couldn't sit there for months. It just wasn't reasonable. But what also wasn't reasonable was imposing the Emergencies Act. That was martial law to deal with a protest. The government having the ability and no consequences in so lightly, in my view, lightly. It was a city protest. It wasn't violent. They weren't burning buildings. They weren't assaulting people. It still needed to be dealt with, but you did not need martial law to deal with it. Yet they did it, and they got away with it. And that's disturbing because they can do it again. They seized people's bank accounts. Likewise, COVID restrictions. I got my vaccinations. I'm not on the big anti-vax thing, but I'm anti-mandate. I'm anti putting people out of work if they choose not to get that vaccination. I'm anti keeping them out of the traveling schools and mobility. That was forced vaccinations, guys. Coercion is not consent. So when we think about what we're pursuing with independence, again, I mean, we got to be rational, not a free-for-all world. Like I said, some dystopian craziness where everybody can run around and do everything. But at the same time, personal freedoms for mobility, property, self, those have to be paramount. So when we work to a new independent West, we've built a system where we're protected. Yeah, unfortunately, from each other. And I'm not talking about from the burglars and so on, which we should be able to protect ourselves from as well, but from the state, from the government, from the mob rule that can use an emergency or something they'll call an emergency to infringe upon your rights and cause damage. Part of what the statists, the term that gets used, and it's a good one, or the people who support big government, the people who think government knows best, people who think government, they brushed off and they mocked people, they belittled people when they would, complain about the lockdowns, when they complain about the restrictions. Oh, so what? You don't have to go to your local pub. Well, that's why I'm laying out. Actually, even those little things, just because you didn't think of it, doesn't mean it was very, very important to somebody else. Or the local swimming pool or golf course, or you name it. I mean, look how ridiculous it got. A kid got the snot beat out of him by Calgary police because he was playing hockey. We saw people getting arrested for sitting alone on a beach. No proper, free state, nation, country should ever allow itself to get into that condition, yet we did. So when we're pursuing independence, it's not just independence, as I said, from the centralized government of Canada that's broken with a terrible system. It's independence from an authoritarian overreach. We must build a better system than what we're leaving. So we've got to have some of those discussions. We've got to have some of those talks. I know people talk about constitutional things like that, and that's what eventually would have to be entrenched into. But let's stay on the higher level. But when we're talking about people, what else does independence mean? It means entrenching personal freedoms as a top priority for ourselves. So we don't have to see wasted time, wasted life with government ruining people's lives as it did. It's just because you can't get those years back. So I just wanted to relate that because I was thinking about my friend. As I said, I'm not a really close friend. I hadn't seen him in many years, but that's because he was locked in his house for years. Uh, government actions can never be taken lightly, and we sort of it's a modern thing. We've sort of allowed government to take over everything, slide into everything. We'll let government take care of that. We'll let government take care of that. Well, that's all fine until you realize that there's things you don't agree with the government with, and there's not a bloody thing you can do about it. So independence must mean freedom, guys. And keep that in mind. That's the positive. That's something we're working towards. It's easy to point out the negatives, and we have to. But then what are we moving towards that's going to be positive? Freedom must always come first.